This week on Enemy Sidelines, presented by Microsoft Teams, Larra Overton, team reporter for the Indianapolis Colts. She joins me once again. It feels like just yesterday, Larra, that we were talking, but really it was just a few weeks ago. And not a lot's changed, but here we are again. Colts versus the Texans, this time up in Indy. That loss for the Texans was a tough one to swallow. And I think we were reeling for a long time. But on the other side, what did that win mean for the Colts?
Well, I first have to clarify that I'm not taunting the Texans with the photo of TY over my shoulder. That's been there for several days. I put that up there. And so it was not immediately before this segment was recorded, I promise. So the Colts really took into Houston a playoff-like mindset. We hear that all the time, that you get into the month of December and you do have that mentality that each and every week you're fighting for to keep yourself alive for the next week that follows. So they have maintained that mindset. They came out of the loss to Tennessee with a chip on their shoulder, knowing they had back-to-back really tough road games against a conference opponent in Las Vegas, and of course the divisional opponent in Houston, facing the Texans twice in a stretch of 3 weeks. And that game, that was a nail biter for the Colts. You're putting all of your faith in your defense at the end of that game to come up with a play. And one of the things that we learned after the game was that Grover Stewart had picked something up over the course of the game. And there was a particular stunt that he wanted to run, that he wanted to utilize in that position. He relayed that to Matt Eberflus, and Flus put him in a position to execute it. And that's what changed the game, what led to the Anthony Walker fumble recovery. And, one of the things is, you look at that game and post that week, that matchup between the Texans and Colts in Houston. And now the next week has gone in different directions for each. The Colts have another win, a big one over the Raiders, and the Texans coming off a loss. But what maintains from that is this immense respect that the Colts have for the Houston Texans. You and I have talked about at the end of the game, the moment where T.Y. Hilton went up and consoled Deshaun Watson, that show of immense respect. I know that this coaching staff has great respect for the Texans, and week in and week out, the resilience that they have proven based on all of the circumstances, the numerous adversities and challenges that you guys have faced in 2020. So for the Indianapolis Colts, you feel like you're in the driver's seat to maintain a push to the playoffs, to extend play out of the regular season, but there is no room for error. There's no ability to let your foot off the gas with the games you have remaining. Houston is always going to play you tough, whether that is at Energy Stadium or if that's at Lucas Oil Stadium. So they're very much taking, again, same thing this week. Again, this is a playoff-like mindset. We are playing for our lives in 2020 to try to extend this season as far as possible, because the AFC is tough this year. Everyone is clawing their way in. Look at the showdown you saw on Monday Night Football. My gosh, that just is an indication of how tough it is to get into the postseason in the AFC in 2020. And the Colts are very much fighting to keep those playoff hopes alive.
Yeah, 9-4 and 4-9. I think some of the best battles that these two teams have had is when they're both sort of clawing to get their way into the playoffs and for division lead. Unfortunately, the Texans mathematically eliminated. And I was going to ask you what the Colts' vision is facing the Texans in the rematch. And I think you're right. I think it's important, obviously, for them to sort of win out and solidify their position. Let me ask you about the guy on the wall behind you that you alluded to earlier, T.Y. Hilton, because before the Texans game against the Titans, that was his first touchdown of the year. He gets another one against the Texans, and then he scores 2 in last week's win over the Raiders. So when you and I spoke last, it was tough sledding for T.Y. Hilton and Phillip Rivers and getting that chemistry going. What's really changed? Has the chemistry just gotten better? Has he just gotten healthier? Has the offensive scheme changed a little bit? What is it that's making T.Y. Hilton really take off the way he has in recent weeks?
I think it's a great question, and it's something that when I talk to Phillip Rivers, when we hear from him week in and week out, he had reiterated that in practice that they're on the same page, they're clicking, and it just had yet to transpire. And there was some frustration from the point. You can feel it for TY. You want him to have. That's from all around. That's from the fan base. That's on a coaching perspective. That's within the team, because everyone saw T.Y. is putting in the work. T.Y. is putting in the time. He and Phillip were clicking in practice, and you just had yet to see it come to fruition in a game. And one of the things that I think led to a bit of a breakout that you've seen from TY. We're seeing him play the best he has since 2018. And part of it is that Philip Rivers, even in those opportunities when maybe TY's numbers and production hadn't been where we've been used to seeing it, Philip was distributing the ball to so many different receivers. I mean, 9, 10, 11 guys who he would get passes to any given week. So it started to be that they were spreading the ball around so well. It was only a matter of time before you just weren't going to be able to keep everybody covered all the time. And that game against Tennessee, you saw the big chunk play. You saw him. I mean, it was very vintage TY, a little toe drag in the end zone for the touchdown grab. And I think he really did build a lot of momentum and some confidence off of that. And you know, the way that he plays in Houston, it's just that mindset that he has where he loves to play in that environment. And so he was able to keep that rolling. And one of the things I believe also that has opened things up for TY is the complementary run game that we've seen, especially with Jonathan Taylor and the production that he is having. I don't want to say that he was having rookie struggles, like that's not it at all, but you did not see the rushing attack numbers that you saw in 2019. And so it just kind of took a while collectively for this offense to really see that ground game get going like they anticipated that it would, like they wanted to see it going. So that's the thing, is when you do start to see the production from your running backs, and then that's just kind of continuing to open up the playbook for T.Y. Hilton. And he's a tough guy. Once he gets rolling, he's a tough guy to contain.
Yeah, we've certainly seen that firsthand. Let me ask you about Jonathan Taylor, because the last time we chatted, it was him, it was Nyheim Hines. They were both sort of splitting the carries, but he's really coming off of a standout performance, especially in that win against the Raiders. 150 yards rushing, 2 touchdowns. Has he solidified himself as a 3-down back? Are the Colts looking at him possibly as the guy? And what happens next year when Marlon Mack comes back? Is there a little bit of that discussion going on?
Well, of course, also when you talk about Jonathan Taylor's production in 2020, he's one of just 4 rookies this season to have multiple 100-yard rushing games. And then he's the first Colts rookie to have multiple 100-yard rushing games since Joseph Adai back in 2006, a guy who was integral to your Super Bowl team back then in that season. So one of the things you look to is, I do think that he has solidified himself as that bell cow back, so to speak. That's always the verbiage that you hear in terms of the guy who is getting the bulk of the carries. I do think that the Colts will very much continue to mix things up, because it's a priority to have Nyheim Hines in position to make some plays and use him in, some of those pass catching roles as well. We've seen Jonathan Taylor also get his hands on the ball in the receiving game as well. And that's one of the things that has really diversified his ability and his production within this offense. One thing worth noting that you do have to think about for Marlon Mack is that he's in a contract year. So it is going to be interesting to see what happens in the offseason. He's continuing to make great progress. He posted a video the other day where he was up and running on the treadmill as he comes back from that torn Achilles. So there are a lot of questions surrounding the future of this running back position. So it's going to be interesting to see what unfolds. I can tell you that Marlon Mack is a very highly respected, very well admired, highly regarded teammate and just guy in the organization. So he is certainly someone who is looked upon as a great leader in this locker room. Jonathan Taylor relies heavily on Marlon Mack's perspective. Marlon has come in and he's sat in on meetings when he's able, while he's juggling his own rehab, when he's able to provide perspective, tried to jump in and do so to help guide Jonathan Taylor. So this is a great situation where you feel like those two guys in a 1-2 punch, or what Frank Reich likes to call a 1-1 punch, because he thinks they're both deserving of number one back distinction. There's a ton of promise for what those guys bring in terms of being a tandem on the field, that you would like to see that if it's able to come to fruition in 2021. There were high hopes for what that would look like in 2020. Unfortunately, losing Marlon due to the injury, but certainly Jonathan Taylor is proving his reliability that we saw coming out of University of Wisconsin.
All right, this Colts offense against the Texans in the second half, scoreless. They come back out against the Raiders. Had such a great win, 44-27, that the Raiders fired their defensive coordinator after the game, Paul Gunther. So that leads us to our next gen stat presented by AWS. The Colts actually rank 5th in the NFL in points per game. They're averaging 28.6 points per game. So let's start with Phillip Rivers. I mean, is he playing the best football you've seen so far this year? Was the Raiders game just an anomaly? What do you see him taking from that game and carrying forward for the next 3 weeks?
I really point to Phillip did not have a great game at Cleveland. That loss to the Browns, I see as a pivotal point for this offense. And after the game, it was interesting. And Deepi, hearing Phillip Rivers press conferences as long as we have in the NFL, I don't think anything surprises you because he's a guy who offers a lot up typically, and he was incredibly candid in that conversation. A week later, it was a week removed from the Cleveland game, from that loss, when he admitted he went back and he read what all of the beat writers were writing, and he said, if Rivers stinks it up, you guys better write Rivers stunk it up, and he didn't play well. And so he looked at all that and he was like, you know what? They're right. I didn't play up to my standard. I didn't play up to the Colts standard. I didn't play to the standard that we practice within. And he channeled all of that and then has put this team in such great position offensively. I mean, I'm looking at the numbers on Sunday against Oakland, 19 of 28 passing for 244 yards and 2 touchdowns, a 118, almost 119 passer rating. And that's been really consistent with where his production has been leading up to the bye, coming out of that loss to Cleveland. And then afterwards, it's continued to be at that same level. He's distributing the ball very, very well. A couple of things to keep in mind as well. He's played games where he's been out his starting center. We've had rotation at left tackle because Anthony Costanzo has that MCL sprain. And then you saw LaRaven Clark come in. LaRaven Clark in the game against the Texans goes down with a torn ACL. You're on your third left tackle in Chaz Green. So then when Anthony Costanzo goes out in the game against Oakland, they move Quentin Nelson over to left tackle. So you think about how impressive it is, Phillip Rivers, not just kind of collectively the numbers he's putting up, but especially too the turnovers that he's avoiding and doing so with some rotation on that offensive line, having some different guys mixing in or guys sliding over into different positions. But to me, I really look to that point, that loss to the Browns, as being a pivotal point for this offense and for Phillip. I mean, you think about as well, he came in on a 1-year deal. It's a 1-year, as you call it, prove it type of contract. And a lot of people, were looking to, is this the right move for the Colts? Of all the free agent quarterbacks who are out there in 2020 free agency, oh man, we're going to see how this plays out. When you look at the situation now, I think it would be tough to find a lot of Indianapolis Colts fans who would not put their support behind wanting to see Phillip Rivers back as an Indianapolis Colt in 2021.
Well, you enjoy his press conferences. I always enjoy his mic'd ups. I think that you guys should mic him up as often as possible. I saw JJ Watt chatting with him at the game here at NRG Stadium, and I whispered to the person next to me from 6 feet away. I said, I wish it was a mic on him because I really want to know what those two are talking about, because I bet it's hilarious. I bet it's really funny. And JJ Watt does say that that's some of the most entertaining trash talk on the field comes from Phillip Rivers.
He never disappoints, and he always does it without cursing. That's the
amazing part. Yes.
From the production department, our job is made easier because we don't have to edit or bleep anything out. It's just a lot of gosh darn it.
Gosh darn, golly geez.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, let's talk about this Colts defense, because you mentioned injuries on the offensive line, but the defense has also suffered through its share of injuries. No Darius Leonard, no Xavier Rhodes. What can you tell us about those two? I know that they mean a lot to that Colts defense.
Oh, they certainly do. And you saw the impact when they went out in the win for Las Vegas. Thank you. Saying loss. I'm still not used to it. I actually earlier was recording something and I said Oakland.
I think you said Oakland. It's okay. It's all good. I think you get a couple of years.
Yeah, okay, good. I need
That's
that.
my own personal.
Anyway, in the win at Las Vegas, you did see Xavier Rhodes and you saw Darius go out late in that game. And, those guys are veteran guys, leaders within your defense. So Darius, they're really monitoring the back issue this week. Their first practice of the week will be on Wednesday. So we'll see what capacity he's able to practice in. Xavier Rhodes, it's a knee. So when we heard from Frank Reich on Monday afternoon, he said that those are situations that would be monitored over the course of the week. One thing to me that is encouraging is that neither of those guys were ruled out. They were both just questionable for the remainder of the game in Las Vegas. So not necessarily does that give you any medical diagnosis or anything like that, but it is to me indicative of it's not as severe as those potentially could have been. So I would certainly look to very closely watching the injury reports over the course of the week with Darius with the back injury and Xavier Rhodes with the knee, because you talk about two of the most physical players on the field, and you need those guys. You need those guys for this stretch. So, and they're also too, they're really, I mean, kind of the same thing with talking about your defense. When you talk about guys like JJ Watt and what he's battled through, it's tough to keep those guys off the field, right? Like they want to be out there. They're such competitors. So it would take a lot for either of those guys or both of those guys to be sidelined in this game coming up against Houston, but it will be certainly something to really watch for, and they will be cautious in terms of monitoring their progress and being safe moving forward.
All right, good stuff, Larra. What are some of your storylines heading into Sunday's game? I know it's a big week for the Colts, as are the next remaining weeks as they look to make their playoff push.
Well, certainly you're looking to Anthony Costanzo and looking at his availability moving forward and what that means for this offensive line if he's unable, or he ended up coming back in to that game. Of course, he left just for a drive or two with that offense, was able to return. So that is encouraging. You do want to be sure that he continues to make that steady progress over the course of this week, because you don't just need him this week. You need him, for these games remaining moving forward as well. So the health of Anthony Costanzo is certainly going to be something that we're continuing to watch. And basically it seemed like that there was a little bit of a tweak that he felt early on in the game at Las Vegas that just needed to be reinforced, and that he came out after that felt pretty strong. But certainly you do want to be sure that he practices well and without limitation or with minimal limitation. I think the other thing is, you mentioned this defense, and how does Kenny Moore come back and continue the performances that we've seen in back-to-back weeks? He had a pick on Deshaun Watson. He had the miraculous, so impressive one-handed interception in the end zone on Darren Waller, picking off Derek Carr. I mean, that's just, one of the plays of the year. I think that's not even coming from my perspective as a Colts reporter. That's in everything I'm reading on social media, all of the chatter you're seeing nationally. And so for Kenny to be on this stretch of games that he is on, and this defense is one that prides itself on takeaways. And we saw Kari Willis last week against the Raiders with a pick six as well. And they're going to need to continue that moving forward. So for me, a lot of focus on this defense and continuing to be really disruptive, play really fast and physical. You mentioned giving up among the fewest points allowed so far in the NFL, and you're going to need them to continue to just be as disruptive as they have been, especially in shutting down teams in the second half as we look through this stretch of December and hopefully a few more weeks after that.
Yeah, Kenny Moore. He ended the long streak that Deshaun Watson had, 210 pass attempts without an interception. And you know what? I asked Deshaun about it that week, and several people said that I jinxed him. So I was really hoping that would not have been ruled an interception, but it was. And you know what? That interception in the end zone against the Raiders was very impressive. A nice one-handed catch. Larra, you're always impressive. I always enjoy catching up with you. I'm not going to get to talk to you again in 2020, but you know what? Hopefully in 2021, we can do this in person and we can meet face-to-face once again.
Yes, I look forward to it, whether it's you're back here, visiting your family in town that's here at Indy, or whether it's, Combine or one way, shape, or form. We're making it happen in 2021.
Sounds good, Larra. Thanks so much for the time, and we'll talk soon.